Good morning. This is TVP World. You're watching World News. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and these are the latest headlines. Overnight, Russian attacks hit the Ukrainian cities of Dnipro and Kharkiv, leaving at least 20 people wounded. Emergency crews are still assessing the damage. Another Russian strike damaged at least 8 residential buildings. In Kharkiv, Russian Shahed drones targeted the Dnipro and Holodnohirsky districts, damaging homes and nearby structures. Ukrainian authorities say the full extent of casualties and damage is still being verified as rescue operations and damage assessments continue. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday that he had a very good call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who he says wants to be helpful in easing tensions in the Middle East. Trump added that he told Putin he could be more helpful by ending the Russian war in Ukraine.
Yes, I had a very good call with President Putin. We had a lot of people on the line from our side, from his side. We were talking about Ukraine, which is just a never-ending fight. And look, there's tremendous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. They can't seem to get it together. But I think it was a positive call on that subject. And we obviously talked then about the Middle East. And he wants to be helpful. I said, you could be more helpful by getting the Ukraine-Russia war over with. That would be more helpful. But we had a very good talk, and he wants to be very constructive.
The Iranian capital of Tehran came under some of the most intense attacks since the war began early Tuesday, with missiles striking the east, south, and west of the city. Iranian state media said U.S. attacks also hit a school and residential building in the city of Homyan. In response to U.S.-Israeli attacks, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has announced that going forward, it will use only its heaviest missiles. Overnight, Iranian attacks were reported in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. The UAE's authorities have warned people to, quote, remain in a safe place as air defenses work to neutralize threats from Iranian drones and missiles. An Iranian drone was also spotted near a U.S. base in Iraq. Israel, meanwhile, continues its offensive against Hezbollah, deploying troops near and across the border and pummeling Beirut with a barrage of missiles. In retaliation, Hezbollah launched missile attacks on the drone control base and military barracks near the Israeli-Lebanese border. Hezbollah also said it carried out a drone attack on the Tzporit base east of Haifa and a missile attack on the Tel Hashom member base near Tel Aviv. Donald Trump warned Iran not to disrupt oil traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, threatening to hit the country 20 times harder in retaliation. Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform late Monday that Iran would not be able to rebuild after American attacks.
If Iran does anything that stops the flow of oil within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the United States of America 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. Additionally, we will take out easily destroyable targets that will make it virtually impossible for Iran to ever be built back as a nation again. Death, fire and fury will rain upon them, but I hope and pray that it does not happen. This is a gift from the United States of America to China and all of those nations that heavily use the Hormuz Strait.
Oil prices fell in early Tuesday trading after comments by U.S. President Donald Trump suggesting the war in the Middle East could end soon. On Monday, prices surged to a 3-year high, nearly $120 a barrel for Brent crude, on fears of global oil shortage after the war in the Gulf effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz. Around 20% of the world's oil supply passed through the waterway. Energy infrastructure has been hit in Iran and across the Gulf region, and supply concerns grow after Iraq and Kuwait began cutting output. But after Trump's comment, Brent crude was trading at just over $94 a barrel early Tuesday. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico has warned of an oil emergency and says the country will join Hungary in blocking a €90 billion loan to Ukraine if the Druzhba pipeline does not resume operations. The dispute comes as the economic situation in both countries worsen. A lot is at stake, especially in Hungary, as the country approaches its general election in April. Our correspondent Andrew Sweeney reports on the latest developments.
Oil reaching over $100 a barrel has Central Europe reeling. Slovakia is already relying on its strategic oil reserves after the Druzhba pipeline stopped processing Russian oil in January. Prime Minister Robert Fico declared an oil emergency, issued vouchers for energy bills, and said he may join Hungary in blocking a military loan for Ukraine until the oil supply is restored.
Blocking this huge military gift to Ukraine is a legitimate tool to achieve the restoration of oil supplies. In any case, the ball is now in the European Union's court.
In Hungary, the economic damage is more apparent. Prices are up. The forint lost 6% of its value against the euro in 1 week, nearing 400 to 1. Fears of inflation are rising. Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who like Fico blames Ukraine for much of the crisis, has introduced petrol price caps while demanding help from the EU.
The Ukrainian oil blockade and the war in the Middle East are sending oil prices soaring. Europe must act. Today I wrote to President Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen calling for the review and suspension of sanctions on Russian energy.
Orban hopes lifting those sanctions will help boost his oil supply ahead of general elections on April 12. His anti-EU Fidesz party is up to 20% behind the pro-Europe TISA in the polls. TISA's leader, Peter Magyar, blames Orban for making consumers foot the bill for the rising price of oil.
TISA is demanding immediate tax cuts and government intervention in the fuel market. With this inaction, Viktor Orban is risking the complete collapse of the Hungarian economy and the forint, a dramatic resurgence of inflation and the further impoverishment of Hungarians.
The economy is one of Magyar's key focuses. He appointed former Shell Vice President István Kapitányi as his economics expert and pledged to unlock 20 billion euros in EU funds. However, Orban's smear campaign associating him with Ukraine, the increase in prices, and an unproven claim that Kyiv may attack Hungarian energy infrastructure may chip away support.
What's happening might be quite frustrating for both Orban and his challenger Peter Magyar. Another proportion of the electorate which has moved to Peter Magyar in the last month from uncertain voter camp or from Fidesz might move back.
As for the military loan for Ukraine, oil crisis or not, Poland's Prime Minister intends to see that it's passed, with or without Budapest or Bratislava.
I'm convinced that Europe can safely use the 90 billion euro for Ukraine without waiting for additional approval from Budapest. We will not keep coming back to this issue just because Mr. Orban is currently more favorably disposed toward Russia than Ukraine.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has not answered Orban, but today she also made it clear that Ukraine will receive the loan. For TVP World in Budapest, Andrew Sweeney.
2 military aircraft carrying evacuated Poles from the Middle East landed in Poland on Monday night. According to the Polish Armed Forces Operational Command on X, 109 Polish citizens returned home aboard the 2 aircraft. This was the 3rd military evacuation flight. In total, 324 people have been evacuated to Poland on military aircraft so far. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski says more than 7,000 Polish citizens have left the Middle East, with over 6,500 traveling on commercial flights. Most of the stranded Poles are in the United Arab Emirates. South Korean media reports that the United States is moving part of its Patriot missile defense systems from the country for use in the war in the Middle East. President Lee Jae-myung said on Tuesday that while he opposes the move, South Korea cannot block U.S. forces from redeploying their weapons. Myung said removing parts of the Patriot defense system would not weaken deterrence against North Korea. More than 28,000 U.S. troops are stationed across South Korea to reinforce defense against the nuclear-armed North. Responding to reports from the redeployment of American military bases in Korea, Taiwan's Defense Minister Wellington Koo said the United States has not approached Taiwan about transferring weapons to the Middle East. Taiwan relies on U.S. military equipment and support as military pressure from China increases. Beijing views the island as its own territory. Finland's Defense Minister Iranian announced on Monday that a new NATO Communications and Information System unit will be based in Riihimäki near Helsinki.
Finland joined NATO in April 2023, following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The unit will strengthen NATO's ability to defend Finland and work on the alliance's communication systems and information technology to support the command and management of NATO forces. It is expected to begin operations early next year in existing facilities, with a new permanent base being established by 2029.
Russian hackers are conducting a large-scale campaign targeting WhatsApp and Signal accounts of Dutch government officials, military personnel, and journalists, the Dutch intelligence services reported on Monday. The hackers reportedly impersonated app technical support, tricking victims into providing verification codes. This allowed them to take over the accounts or add their own devices to existing accounts and gain access to communications. According to Dutch intelligence services, similar campaigns had been observed in the past, including phishing via group chat invitations from 2023 to 2024 and re-verification scams in 2025. German intelligence also warned of a similar campaign earlier this year, reporting attacks targeting politicians, military personnel, diplomats, and investigative journalists in Germany and other European countries. A film about domestic violence won 5 prizes, including Best Film at this year's OIF Film Awards, often called the Polish Oscars. Dom Dobre, which translates as A Good House, is directed by Wojciech Smierzowski and stars Tomasz Schudhart and Agata Turkot. The film received nominations in 12 of the 20 categories. It is based on real stories from survivors of domestic violence. Accepting the awards, the director thanked the women who trusted him with their accounts. The winners of the 28th OIF Awards, presented by the Polish Film Academy, were announced on Monday during a gala in Warsaw. And with that, we conclude this edition of World News. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.